The Seeds of Rebellion: How a War Debt Ignited a Revolution. For over a century and a half, the British colonies in North America had flourished, a vast network of settlements bound by allegiance to the crown, yet distinctly American in spirit. From the perilous beginnings of Jamestown in 1607, where hardship, disease, starvation, and conflict with Native Americans marked the initial years of the British colonists, these distant outposts had grown into vibrant societies, accustomed to a considerable degree of self-governance. Their assemblies, born of necessity and tradition, had long been the primary engines of local lawmaking and taxation. The Atlantic Ocean, a formidable barrier, had fostered a sense of independence, even as they remained loyal subjects of the British Empire. But a cataclysmic global conflict, the French and Indian War, or as it was known in Europe, the 7 Years' War, would irrevocably alter this comfortable arrangement. From 1754 to 1763, the forests and frontiers of North America became a battleground in a sprawling imperial struggle. Great Britain, with its formidable military and naval power, ultimately emerged victorious, seizing vast territories from France, including Canada and lands stretching west to the Mississippi. The empire had never been larger, never more powerful. Yet, victory came at a staggering price. The war had been immensely expensive, leaving Great Britain burdened with a monumental national debt. To finance this global triumph, the British treasury was depleted. And so, a new question arose in the halls of Parliament in London: how to recover these staggering costs? The answer, many believed, lay across the Atlantic in the very colonies that had benefited from the war's outcome. The year is now 1765. For the American colonists, the immediate post-war period brought a jarring shift. The era of salutary neglect, where Britain had largely allowed the colonies to manage their own affairs with minimal interference, was over. London's new approach was direct, assertive, and, to the colonists, deeply unsettling. The first tremors of this change had been felt with acts like the Sugar Act of 1764. Though it actually reduced the tax on molasses from an earlier, widely ignored law, it was coupled with much stricter enforcement. British naval vessels now patrolled the coasts with renewed vigor, determined to stamp out the rampant smuggling that had become a colonial custom. Then came the Currency Act, also in 1764, which severely restricted the colonies' ability to print their own paper money, forcing them to rely on British currency. These measures, seemingly designed for economic efficiency, were met with growing colonial opposition. In town meetings across Massachusetts and beyond, voices began to rise in protest. The fundamental grievance was clear, articulated by passionate men and women. Taxation without representation, they cried. They argued that Parliament, thousands of miles away, a body in which the colonies had no elected voice, had no legitimate right to levy taxes upon them. It was a principle, they insisted, deeply rooted in the rights of all Englishmen, rights they believed were being systematically eroded. And then, a new decree arrived from London. A piece of legislation that would not merely cause unrest, but would ignite a firestorm of resentment across all 13 colonies: the Stamp Act. Picture a colonial merchant, his hands calloused from years of trade, reaching for a stack of bills of lading. These were the lifeblood of his business, the essential documents that accounted for every shipment, every transaction. But now, as his fingers brush against the paper, he feels something new, something alien. A small, embossed piece of paper bearing the royal insignia, a revenue stamp. This wasn't merely a formality. It signified that a tax, directly from the British government, had been paid. A tax not levied by their own elected representatives, but dictated by Parliament in London, a body in which the colonies had no voice whatsoever. Consider a lawyer poring over stacks of vital legal documents, wills, deeds, court papers. Each one, absolutely essential for the smooth functioning of colonial society, now demanded these very same stamps, adding layers of cost and complexity to the most mundane aspects of everyday life. Imagine the palpable frustration of a newspaper editor a purveyor of information and opinion, struggling to disseminate his daily news, now facing an added expense for every single issue printed. Even the simple pleasures, the moments of leisure, were not spared. Think of families gathered around a humble table for a game of cards, their laughter stifled as they realized that even each card in the deck must bear this official stamp. This Stamp Act wasn't just about the money, though the financial burden was certainly real. It struck at a much deeper, more fundamental principle the colonists held dear: taxation without representation. They argued, with increasing vehemence, that as Englishmen, they possessed the inalienable right to be taxed only by their own elected assemblies. Parliament, thousands of miles away, utterly unfamiliar with their local conditions, had no right, no moral authority to impose these direct taxes upon them. It was an assault on their cherished liberties, a betrayal of their understanding of the British Constitution. News of the Stamp Act spread like wildfire through the colonies, igniting a unified blaze of outrage. Public meetings erupted in town squares, from the northern seaports to the southern plantations. Fiery speeches were delivered, denouncing the act as a grave violation of their fundamental rights. Colonial assemblies, though loyal, passed bold resolutions declaring the tax unjust and unconstitutional. And out of this ferment of defiance, new, clandestine organizations began to emerge. Secret societies, most notably the Sons of Liberty. During this period, the provocative grassroots group emerged in colonial America, employing extreme forms of civil disobedience, including threats and, at times, actual violence to intimidate loyalists and provoke outrage in the British government. These radicals aimed to force moderate colonial leaders into open confrontation with the British Crown. The Sons achieved one of their earliest victories in the midst of the Stamp Act, which was the first direct tax imposed on American colonists by the British government, and had been in effect for barely a month when a group of Boston merchants and craftsmen wrote to Andrew Oliver, the newly appointed stamp collector. In their letter, they ordered Oliver to appear the following day at noon beneath the Liberty Tree in Boston South and to publicly resign his post. Provided that you comply with the above, you shall be treated with the greatest politeness and humanity, the letter stated, leaving Oliver to imagine what dreadful consequences might await if he refused. He needed little convincing. The next day, in a driving rainstorm, Oliver walked through the streets of Boston and resigned his post before a cheering crowd of 2,000. It was a powerful demonstration of the Sons of Liberty's fearsome influence. The group likely evolved from a secretive circle of 9 Boston patriots known as the Loyal Nine. The first Sons of Liberty chapters emerged in Boston and New York City, with additional cells soon spreading to other colonies and ultimately prominent leaders that included Samuel Adams and John Hancock. The groundwork for the American Revolution, like no other in the world, had now begun. Thank you for watching The Seeds of Rebellion: How a War Debt Ignited a Revolution. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like, subscribe, and also share while helping our channel.